Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're not just looking at a topic, we're actively engaging with it as philosophers. Think of it as putting on a specific lens to see beyond the surface and uncover some really fundamental understandings.
Exactly. It's about adopting that philosophical mindset, asking those core why and how questions, you know, to gain a richer perspective on something we might already be familiar with.
And the subject we're turning this philosophical lens towards is the incredible Maria Montessori, born 1870, died 1952. Now, many of you will know her name because of the Montessori educational method. I mean, with over 15,000 schools worldwide, that impact is undeniable.
Huge impact.
Hmm.
But her work in education, as groundbreaking as it was, is just one facet of a truly deep thinker. Montessori was also, well, a psychologist, an anthropologist, a medical doctor, a keen observer of culture, and yes, a philosopher in the truest sense.
That's right. Her writings venture into some surprising territory, exploring metaphysics, the very nature of reality, political philosophy, and so much more. And that's our mission today, to sort of act as philosophers ourselves and explore the surprising philosophical depths within Montessori's work.
Yeah, go beyond the classroom.
Exactly. Reveal her insights into life itself, how our minds work, our understanding of morality, and even like the structure of society.
And what's particularly compelling is that her philosophical ideas weren't just abstract theories spun from an armchair. They were often profoundly influenced by what she called revelations, those key insights she gained from her extensive hands-on work with children. This is a philosophy born from observation, really.
Okay, so let's start to unpack this philosophical journey by looking at Montessori's own path into philosophy. It wasn't exactly a straight line, was it? Not a typical academic route.
Not at all. Her initial studies were in, well, quite different fields. She first studied technical engineering, believe it or not, and then made history by enrolling in and graduating from medical school at the University of Rome, one of the first women in Italy to achieve that.
Engineering and medicine. That's a fascinating foundation. It really suggests a mind that was always driven to understand how things operate, right? Whether mechanical systems or the human body.
Precisely. And it's quite interesting to note that early on, she reportedly wanted to be anything but a teacher. She really saw herself as a scientist, scientist of human nature.
Huh.
However, her experiences after medical school led her down a different but related path. She co-directed an orthophrenics school for children facing various challenges, and it was there that she started to argue that their difficulties were more educational than medical.
So her scientific background actually guided her towards education as a primary way to address fundamental human issues. And this realization sparked her interest in the work of educational pioneers like Edouard Seguin and Jean-Gaspard Itard, whom she traveled to Paris to study, right?
Absolutely. And this practical engagement, this deep dive into understanding and helping these children, eventually led her to formal philosophical studies. In 1903, she went back to the University of Rome and enrolled as a philosophy student, even without the typical prerequisite diploma. Her stated aim was to study normal pedagogy and of the principles upon which it is based, a deliberate philosophical inquiry.
That's a bold move, diving into philosophy with such a specific purpose. And who were some of the thinkers she engaged with during this time? Any big names?
Well, she took courses in the history of philosophy, ethics, metaphysics, and the philosophy of education, with prominent figures like Antonio Labriola and Luigi Credaro. She was also keenly aware of the major intellectual movements of the era, pragmatism, positivism, that sort of thing. She was actively positioning herself within these philosophical conversations.
It sounds like she was fully immersing herself in the world of philosophical thought. And interestingly, even then, she noticed this kind of separation, this gap between the sciences and the humanities.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
A contemporary observer noted that she saw the two camps very clearly, the humanities professors who sometimes looked down on science and the scientists who, dismissed philosophy. And she had this vision that one day a teacher would emerge who could bridge that divide, uniting these two fundamental ways of understanding the world.
Which, in a way, foreshadows her own interdisciplinary approach, doesn't it? She was constantly drawing on her scientific training and her philosophical studies to craft her unique perspective. And beyond her formal academic pursuits, she was also actively involved in progressive social causes, I understand.
That's right. She held teaching positions in hygiene and anthropology, which further blurred the lines between her scientific and humanistic interests. Her 1910 book, Pedagogical Anthropology, really began to build that bridge she envisioned. And she was also a vocal participant in feminist movements, even advocating for women's suffrage with a student group called Thought and Action. This philosophical commitment to human rights was evident early on.
So, from the beginning, she was concerned with both understanding the fundamental nature of being human and working towards a more just and equitable society. This definitely sets the stage for the deep philosophical underpinnings of her educational work.
Precisely. And her educational philosophy wasn't just about a collection of practical techniques. She explicitly aimed to elevate pedagogy to a definite science, grounded in robust philosophical foundations. She was asking fundamental philosophical questions about the nature of learning and development.
Okay, let's delve into that foundation then. What were the core philosophical tenets that underpinned her approach to education?
Well, two key principles really stand out, and they are deeply intertwined: the freedom of the child and the prepared environment. For Montessori, freedom wasn't just like a nice add-on. It was fundamental to the very nature of being human, particularly in childhood. She believed children needed to be free to choose their own work, free from constant external imposition, so they could spontaneously follow the natural laws of their own inner development.
But this wasn't a free-for-all, right? The concept of the prepared environment seems absolutely crucial in providing a framework for that freedom.
Absolutely. Montessori recognized that freedom thrives within structure. The prepared environment provides conditions most favorable to that development, an environment carefully designed to allow the child to express themselves spontaneously and offers the necessary materials for auto-education or self-directed learning. Think child-sized furniture that respects their autonomy, practical tools, those meticulously designed learning materials.
Right, materials that cater to their specific developmental needs. It's about philosophically respecting the child's inherent drive to learn.
Exactly. It's about creating an entire ecosystem where the child can flourish through their own intrinsic activity. And within this framework, she observed this fascinating phenomenon she called normalization. Now, that might sound like standardization, but my understanding is it's actually quite the opposite.
Right, yeah, normalization sounds a bit uniform.
It does, but in Montessori's terms, it's not about making all children conform. Instead, think of normalization as her profound discovery of the child's inherent blueprint for learning and behavior emerging naturally when the noise of external control fades. It's the emergence of the child's true personality when they are in a supportive environment and can engage in purposeful work. She saw it as a psychological recovery, basically.
Ah, like the authentic self constructing itself in a healthy way. So it's about unlocking their innate potential, their philosophical essence, maybe, rather than imposing external norms. And she also identified these sensitive periods in childhood development. What role did those insights play?
Sensitive periods are specific windows of time when children have this heightened, almost magnetic attraction and capacity for learning particular skills or acquiring certain knowledge. Recognizing these periods is philosophically crucial in the prepared environment because it allows educators to provide the right opportunities at the precise moment when the child's inner drive to learn that specific thing is at its peak. It's sort of catching the developmental wave.
It's like developmentally seizing the moment.
Yeah.
And what about the role of imagination? I know that can be a significant debate in children's education. What was her philosophical stance on that?
Montessori held a somewhat nuanced view on fantasy, particularly for younger children, say under 6. She philosophically believed that imaginative exploration in these early years should be firmly grounded in truth and real-world experiences. Later on, imagination takes on a more significant role, but even then, she emphasized its vital connection to reality.
Interesting. It seems like she prioritized building a strong, factual foundation in the real world before children delve too deeply into the abstract realm of fantasy. And I know her method heavily incorporates hands-on, sensory-rich activities. That feels very core.
Absolutely. Her emphasis on sensory education and embodied movement is philosophically key. She viewed the senses as the fundamental pathways to intellectual development, and she deeply understood that learning is intrinsically linked to physical activity. Think of the carefully designed concrete materials engaging multiple senses, the freedom of movement allowed in the classroom, all supporting a holistic development.
It's a very holistic approach, recognizing the interconnectedness of mind and body in learning. And I also recall that she wasn't a big fan of traditional disciplinary methods like constant interruption, punishment, and even praise.
That's correct. Montessori philosophically saw interruption as disruptive to the deep concentration she frequently observed in children engaged in meaningful work. She rejected punishment as ultimately ineffective and potentially damaging, a violation of their inherent dignity, really. And surprisingly, she also cautioned against excessive praise, arguing it could foster a dependence on external validation rather than nurturing their own internal sense of accomplishment.
That's a really nuanced perspective on motivation and self-worth. It challenges a lot of common practices. And the Montessori materials often have this built-in control of error. How does that practical element connect back to her broader philosophical ideas about how we learn?
The control of error. It's a brilliant example of her philosophical emphasis on auto-education. These self-correcting materials empower children to learn from their own mistakes independently, fostering critical problem-solving skills and a profound sense of autonomy. It perfectly aligns with her core belief that learning should be a self-directed journey driven by the child's own exploration, experimentation, and discovery.
It all circles back to that foundational idea of freedom within a structured environment, philosophically empowering the child to be an active architect of their own learning. Okay, now let's shift our philosophical gaze a bit wider to the bigger picture. What were some of Montessori's core metaphysical ideas, her understanding of the fundamental nature of reality?
Right. This is where her thinking becomes truly expansive and particularly engaging for us, acting as philosophers.
Mm-hmm.
Montessori's metaphysics, her exploration of the basic structure of existence, emphasizes active forces and an inherent sense of purpose or teleology within the universe. Some scholars have even drawn parallels to Hegel's view of history or Bergson's creative evolution. Patrick Frierson calls it her metaphysics of life.
Metaphysics of life. That's a compelling phrase. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate on this idea of active forces and this inherent directionality, this teleology she saw?
For Montessori, final causes, or intrinsic purposes, are fundamental to life. Living organisms don't just passively exist, they actively take in nourishment and transform it towards a specific end, their own growth and development. She observed this inherent teleological drive, not just in individual organisms, but also at the level of the species, a kind of creative energy that propels both individual flourishing and the progress of the species as a whole.
So she perceived a kind of inherent directionality embedded within life itself. But it sounds like this went even beyond the realm of living things in her philosophical framework. That seems unusual.
Absolutely, and yeah, it is quite unique. Her vital teleology extends beyond the biological realm. She believed this underlying life force is what creates rocks and soil and sustains the harmony of the earth. It's the force that creates the world, a fundamental energy upon which the very evolution of our planet depends. She even spoke of the cosmic function of each living being and even of inanimate natural objects.
Whoa, inanimate objects having a cosmic function. Okay, as philosophers, we have to unpack that. What did she mean by that?
Indeed, she saw nature as a grand, interconnected harmony, a cosmic plan of construction where everything rocks, water, plants, animals, humans fits into a larger, purposeful design. It's this concept of ecological holism, where the individual teleological orientations of all beings serve a more comprehensive cosmic plan. It emphasizes a deep, fundamental interconnectedness.
So it's not just about individual development or species survival, but about how everything contributes to this larger overarching cosmic order. And where does the mind, that central focus of philosophical inquiry, fit into this vast picture?
Montessori viewed the emergent mind as a powerful telluric force arising from complex biological order. She actually borrowed this term telluric from geology, suggesting the mind is a natural phenomenon emerging from the very processes of the earth itself.
Interesting.
It's a higher form of teleologically oriented agency than mere biological life, possessing its own unique and irreducible laws. She even conceived of a psychosphere, a kind of mental environment that complements and interacts with the physical biosphere.
A psychosphere. It sounds like she was envisioning a layered reality where consciousness and thought play a crucial role in the ongoing evolution of the cosmos. And what about the more unconscious aspects of the mind, something philosophers have chewed on for centuries?
Oh, she delved into that too, introducing the intriguing concepts of Horm and Mem. Horm is a kind of unconscious volition, a fundamental life force that inherently guides our efforts towards achieving goals. Think Bergson's élan vital, or even Freud's libido, though she credited Percy Nunn. Mem, on the other hand, is a form of unconscious cognition or memory, the inherent tendency of living substance to retain the effects of its interactions with the environment.
So, Horm is the underlying unconscious drive, and Mem is the unconscious record of our experiences shaping that drive. That's a fascinating way to philosophically connect our conscious actions to these deeper, unconscious roots of behavior and development. And given her strong emphasis on the natural world, what were her philosophical thoughts on the relationship between, say, God and nature?
This is a complex area, and honestly, scholarly interpretations vary quite a bit, even among those acting as philosophers of her work. Montessori was a practicing Catholic, and she frequently connected the inherent purpose she saw in nature with a governing intelligence or divine spirit. Her writings do include explicit discussions of God and applying her methods to religious instruction.
Okay.
However, the precise role of theism within her broader philosophical framework is definitely debated. Some emphasize her deep religious sensibility, while others highlight instances where her views seem to diverge perhaps from traditional Catholic doctrine.
It sounds like her personal faith certainly informed her worldview, but maybe her core philosophical framework wasn't entirely dependent on traditional religious explanations. Is that fair?
That's a fair and nuanced assessment, I think. Ultimately, even when she invoked the concept of God, she often redirected attention back to the child, emphasizing the child's own powers given to him by the Creator and the wonderful powers of divine creation within the child's soul. Her theological statements often seem to serve to underscore the inherent dignity and immense potential of the developing human being.
So even her understanding of the divine seemed to center on a profound respect for the inherent worth and capabilities of the child. Okay, let's move on to how Montessori philosophically believed we come to know things. Her epistemology.
Right, her epistemology, her theory of knowledge, can be aptly described as interested empiricism. She firmly believes sensory experience forms the bedrock of all intellectual understanding. As Andrew Colgan notes, her method inherently establishes the conditions for epistemologically sensitive education, one that truly respects how knowledge is acquired.
Interested empiricism. Okay, the empiricism part clearly points to the importance of sensory experience. But what does the interested aspect signify in her philosophical view? What makes it interested?
The interested part is crucial. It signifies that our sensory processes aren't passive, like, a blank slate just recording everything indiscriminately. Instead, our attention is inherently selective, guided by our inner drives, our developmental needs, our interests. As she wrote, "In the world around us, we do not see everything, but only some things that suit us according to an inner drive." Perception was active engagement driven by this inner interest.
That aligns perfectly with her inactive view of the mind, where we are constantly interacting with and shaping our understanding of our environment. And how did this active view of sensory experience differ from traditional empiricists like, say, John Locke?
Well, Montessori differed from Locke in several significant ways. Firstly, as we've touched on, she fundamentally rejected the idea that our senses are just passive recipients. She philosophically believed even the most basic sensory experience requires active attention, internal organization, cooperation from the individual. It's not enough that an object should be before our eyes to make us see it. It is necessary that we should fix our attention upon it, she argued.
So even just seeing isn't a given. It demands active participation, focused intention. And another key distinction in her epistemology was her strong belief that sensory awareness isn't fixed, but something that can be actively trained and cultivated.
Exactly. Unlike Locke, who largely saw the capacity for making sensory distinctions as innate, Montessori keenly observed that developing even fundamental sensory discrimination requires what she termed sensory gymnastics, specific exercises to refine our perceptual abilities. Her famous color tablets, where kids learn to differentiate increasingly subtle shades. Perfect example. She noted many adults struggle with those distinctions without that kind of focused training.
That's a fascinating and powerful point. It directly challenges the notion of passively receiving sensory info and underscores the role of active engagement and deliberate practice in developing the very foundations of our perception and thus our understanding. And she also proposed an empiricist account of unconscious intelligence, which sounds a bit like a contradiction.
It might seem paradoxical at first, but her reasoning was quite coherent within her framework. Given her empiricist stance that cognition is largely associations formed through sensory experience, and her concept of mnem as this unconscious experience-based memory, she logically extended the traditional association of ideas to the unconscious level. She drew on Richard Siemens' idea of engrams, unconscious traces of past experiences, to explain how our unconscious mind constantly forms associations, influencing our behavior and learning.
So our unconscious mind is continuously making connections and patterns based on our accumulated experiences, significantly contributing to our overall intelligence. That's a remarkably comprehensive view of knowledge acquisition, conscious and unconscious. And beyond these core ideas, she also elaborated on what she termed intellectual virtues.
Yes. In the context of her interest in empiricism and her focus on actively developing cognitive abilities, Montessori outlined a distinctive virtue epistemology. She viewed intellectual virtues not just as nice traits, but as cultivatable capacities that directly contribute to reliable knowledge acquisition. Patrick Frierson, looking at her work philosophically, identified several. Epistemic character, a commitment to truth-seeking intellectual love of learning, refined sensory acuity, patience, intellectual humility, courage to explore new ideas,
Okay.
and even physical dexterity, recognizing its crucial role in embodied learning.
Physical dexterity as an intellectual virtue. Wow. That powerfully connects back to her emphasis on embodied cognition and learning through doing. It's about the skillful interplay of mind and body in pursuing knowledge itself.
Precisely. And her emphasis on deep concentration and self-directed work also resonates strongly with the concept of flow, right? That state of complete immersion. Her methods are designed to foster an environment where this optimal learning experience can flourish, contributing to both intellectual development and creative thinking.
It seems clear her epistemology wasn't just abstract theory, but was deeply practically interwoven with her educational approach, aiming to cultivate not just knowledge, but the intellectual character needed for a meaningful pursuit of understanding. Okay, let's turn our philosophical attention now to morality. How did Montessori's work with children give her unique insights into human flourishing and moral development?
Montessori firmly believed that the meticulous study of the child could provide profound insights into human flourishing and moral character development, extending to illuminate all human questions. Her detailed observations revealed a new child, one possessing an inherent drive towards challenging work and a natural capacity for developing crucial moral virtues.
And central to this optimistic view was the concept of inherent agency and independence from a really young age, wasn't it? That seems foundational in her moral philosophy.
Absolutely. For Montessori, freedom wasn't just pedagogical technique, but a paramount aspect of healthy moral development. She saw children having a natural teleological orientation towards flourishing, and her whole pedagogy was designed to respect and nurture that inherent agency, even unconsciously via that inner drive. This perspective put her at odds with traditional views, emphasizing original sin and the need for strict external control. She argued quite radically that children's innate agency was actually less corrupted than adults.
So she fundamentally viewed children as inherently capable and naturally striving for independence if given the right environment and freedom. And this optimistic view led to her identifying key pillars of ethical life. What were those foundational principles?
She highlighted three main pillars: character, respect for the work of others, and social solidarity. Character for Montessori wasn't just good behavior. It was the developed capacity and tendency to pursue self-chosen work with persistence and a striving for perfection. You can almost hear echoes of Nietzschean ideas of self-overcoming there.
Character as the internal drive towards self-perfection through dedicated work. Okay. And the second pillar was respect for the work of others.
Yes, exactly. This respect wasn't just a polite convention learned by rote. It was seen as a natural outgrowth of a well-developed character. When individuals are deeply engaged in their own meaningful work, they naturally develop genuine respect for the effort others invest. In the Montessori classroom, with limited resources and shared space, children learn to wait, observe, and respect each other's work through direct experience.
So morality learned organically through practice and environmental dynamics, not just abstract rules or rewards. And the third pillar was social solidarity.
Also sometimes called society by cohesion. This extended beyond mere respect to a deeper sense of unity, a shared will and collective purpose within a community. A bit more Hegelian, perhaps the individual finding their place and contributing to the greater whole.
So it's a progression. Individual agency and character lead to respect for others, culminating in collective belonging and shared purpose. And one particularly fascinating aspect was her deeply embodied ethics. Can you explain that?
Exactly. Montessori astutely emphasized that moral virtues aren't just abstract concepts, but are actually developed through our bodily practices and movements. She even argued that having a strong will, essential for moral action, requires mastery over one's own body. Virtues like respect and courtesy are learned through concrete actions: walking carefully, waiting patiently, handling materials with care. These small embodied practices, repeated, shape moral character from the ground up.
It's a very practical, grounded approach to ethics, linking physical actions, habits, and our moral being. Now let's explore another significant dimension: her feminism. She was involved quite early on, wasn't she?
Absolutely. Even before her pedagogical fame, Montessori was breaking gender barriers in Italy, pursuing engineering and medicine. She was a vocal participant in international women's congresses, advocating for equal pay, opposing colonialism, supporting feminist organizations. Some scholars argue feminism was a fundamental guiding thread through her early intellectual development.
That's powerful, suggesting her commitment to women's rights was intrinsically interwoven with her whole worldview. And her feminism seems to have had a strong practical focus.
Yes, it largely aligned with the moderate 19th century Italian practical feminism, emphasizing demonstrating women's actual capacities for active roles in society, not just focusing on formal power like suffrage, though she supported that too. Her own success was a testament to this, and in her classrooms, she consciously created environments where boys and girls explored interests freely, without rigid gender roles.
So her educational work itself was a form of feminist action, challenging traditional limitations. And she also developed what's been termed scientific feminism. What did that involve?
This involved actively using science's authority to challenge prevailing misogynistic theories, claiming women's inherent biological inferiority. She directly engaged with these unfounded theories, using anthropology to argue for women's equal intellectual potential. Plus, she promoted scientific literacy among women as crucial empowerment, encouraging rational reasoning and choices about marriage, motherhood, etc.
Empowering women through scientific knowledge and rational thought. Very forward-thinking. And she also advocated for maternal feminism. That term can be loaded today. What was her specific angle?
Her maternal feminism mainly focused on empowering women within reproduction and advocating for children's well-being. She believed scientifically informed mothers, understanding child development, would raise healthier, stronger children, benefiting the whole species. However, it's important to note this aspect has faced criticism from modern feminists for potentially reinforcing biological determinism and perhaps overlooking women's choices beyond motherhood.
It sounds complex, maybe a bit paradoxical, balancing recognition of reproductive roles with broader empowerment and challenging patriarchal structures. And her feminist beliefs were linked to her pacifist views, too.
Absolutely. From her early feminist involvement, she consistently combined women's rights advocacy with condemning colonialism and committing to international peace. She fundamentally saw women's empowerment linked to pursuing a more peaceful world, believing free women with full rights would be a powerful force for peace.
A hopeful vision of empowered women building a more peaceful global society. And it's striking how her understanding of women's oppression informed her perspective on children's rights.
Yes, she very frequently drew direct parallels between the paternalistic treatment of women and the similar disempowering treatment of children. She recognized adults often acted in ways maybe meant well, but ultimately undermined children's dignity, stifled development, restricted autonomy, much like the patronizing treatment of women then. Her feminist lens let her critique the often invisible oppression children faced.
It truly seems her feminism provided a framework for understanding power dynamics and advocating for the liberation of marginalized groups, women, and children. Finally, let's delve into her views on peace, education, and the rights of the child, which seem to culminate many of her core ideas.
Indeed. Montessori firmly believed establishing peace is fundamentally the work of education. Erica Moretti's recent work brilliantly highlights how central peace was to her entire project. For Montessori, as Moretti says, the ultimate goal was lasting peace, and education was the most powerful and effective method for achieving it. Her own theory of peace evolved, starting with inner harmony in the child and expanding to global interconnectedness and mutual respect.
So peace wasn't just absence of conflict, but actively cultivating inner peace and extending that harmony outward. And her approach to peace education was distinctive, wasn't it?
Yes, very much. Unlike traditional approaches focusing on teaching about conflicts or treaties, Montessori focused on creating environments where children could actively learn to work together freely, collaboratively, developing their full potential. She believed fostering inner peace, moral development, and interconnectedness through daily classroom experiences was the most profound path to lasting human peace.
Creating the conditions for peace to emerge naturally, rather than just teaching it as a concept. And she also advocated for specific initiatives like the White Cross and the Social Party of the Child.
Right. The White Cross was envisioned to address the often overlooked spiritual, emotional, and intellectual needs of child victims of war, complementing the Red Cross's physical aid. The Social Party of the Child was even more radical, advocating for children's fundamental rights and active participation in political and social life. She even drafted statutes for it, arguing children, as vital members of society, should have a legitimate voice in public debates affecting their lives.
That's remarkably powerful, recognizing children not just as future citizens, but as individuals with inherent rights and a voice now. It underscores her commitment to a more peaceful world by empowering children from the start.
Absolutely. Her enduring vision was that by nurturing children's potential and agency, we could cultivate generations inclined towards peace, cooperation, and understanding, ultimately contributing to the positive evolution of the cosmos itself.
Maria Montessori was so clearly much more than simply an influential educator. Our deep dive today has truly revealed her as a profound and multifaceted philosopher who thoughtfully applied her unique insights across a remarkably broad spectrum: education, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, feminism, peace advocacy, all deeply informed by her meticulous observations of the child.
Hmm.
It's genuinely surprising and incredibly insightful to see just how intrinsically linked her practical methods were to these much deeper philosophical understandings.
Indeed. Her core emphasis on the inherent agency, the potential, the intrinsic dignity of the developing human being from early childhood through adulthood really challenges many conventional ways of thinking about individual growth, societal progress, and ultimately our collective role within the grand evolution of the cosmos.
It certainly does give us a great deal to contemplate. We strongly encourage you to delve even further into her extensive writings and the ongoing research into her profound and enduring work. Thank you for joining us on this truly enlightening deep dive.